Welcome to this particular week's Navigate. This is really designed to help you navigate through the twists, the turns, the challenges that are occurring. And I'm super excited today to have someone who's outside of the industry, but has done quite a bit of work within real estate and a huge amount of work in the leadership space. And that's none other than Rachael Robertson. So Rachael, fantastic to have you here. Hey, thank you so much for your contribution and sharing some great insights. And Rachael, you've got this amazing experience, and whilst we have been in lockdown, you actually chose to get into lockdown, whereas the rest of us didn't choose that particular strategy. And even though Australia and New Zealand are coming out of that, there are some amazing lessons that we can learn and take on board. Rachael, by the way, has spoken at one of our leadership conferences, Principal Advance, and a number of our members then had Rachael come in and do some great work with their leadership team around some key strategies, Rachael, that you experienced and learned to be able to go through that. So looking forward to today. Great to have you here.
Thank you. And I've seen a few familiar names popping up there in the chat box. So yeah, I'm stoked. I'm rapt to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. So Rachael, I think today it'd be great to do a little bit of around your backstory. So how did you get to be in Antarctica for a period of time with, I think, 18 people over 9 months, sort of in isolation, and the learnings that actually came out of that as well. But before we get to that, a little bit of the backstory. How did you get there?
I would love to say it was a strategic career move, but as some of you know, it wasn't. So for the people who haven't seen me present, I'll show you. This is how I ended up there. Well, actually, this is the original advertisement. So 100 years ago, this is how we recruited for Antarctic expeditions. Shackleton put this ad in the paper over in London, and legend has it, I think something like 5,000 men applied, and that's how we filled the first ever expedition. But 100 years later, not much has changed. It's still bitterly cold. There's still months of darkness. Our safe return is no longer doubtful. We've got workplace health and safety legislation now, so they have an attempt to bring us back. And of course, women are welcome and wanted. But 100 years after this ad appeared, not much has changed. And here in Australia and New Zealand, we still recruit for Antarctic expeditions by putting an ad in a newspaper. And I just answered the ad. That's the ad. I was just flicking through a newspaper and I saw the penguins, and that's what caught my eye. And then I noticed that they were recruiting for personal attributes, and I'd actually never seen that before. And so I got online and I found out it was for this job called station leader. And the attributes they were after were things like resilience, empathy, integrity, all the things that you guys need in real estate. And I thought, what a great idea to recruit people who've actually got the qualities and the skills you need for a job, and then you can teach them the technical stuff. So I only applied for the job hoping to get to the job interview stage, because I wanted to get to the interview and copy their questions and bring their questions back to my business. I never wanted the job. I didn't even know that after I'd applied, I find out there isn't a job interview. It's actually a week-long boot camp in the Central Highlands of Tasmania. So I end up on this boot camp with 13 men competing for a job. And then they rang and offered it to me. And I thought, you know what? I'd rather regret what I did than regret what I didn't do. And that's how I ended up there. It was just an opportunity that came away. And I thought, yeah, I'll have a crack at this. And that's how I ended up down there, quite by accident.
Wow, that's incredible. So based on that, that's a fairly intense, like a week-long boot camp. They start with a number of people and then obviously whittle it down. Is that the process?
Yeah, so we go through, the actual selection process goes for about 6 months. So they have a whole, I think about 150 people applied the year I applied. And then they shortlist that to a phone interview. And I think about 60 have a phone interview. And then they take a core group of about 13 or 14 away for the boot camp. And the boot camp really is just designed to put you under pressure. That's all it's about, to pile the pressure on and see how you cope, and to try to simulate the kind of pressure you'll be under in Antarctica. So we're working long days. We work from, I think, 7 in the morning to 9 or 10 o'clock at night. You're sharing a cabin with 3 or 4 other people and sharing bathrooms, and you're being watched the whole time. So it's really just trying to put you under the same pressure you'll be under in Antarctica to try and to weed out the people who will cope and won't cope with that kind of intensity, because it's a 24-hour-a-day job for a year, as you said. So you're there for a year, can't get out, can't come home. So they really have to make sure they get the right people in the first place, because there's no second chance.
And then as station leader, you have a responsibility, getting down there. So there's the getting down there, there's the experience, and then bringing 18 people together who didn't choose each other into a fundamental team to be able to navigate through 9 months of isolation.
Yeah, and I'll show you my team. I'll pull it up. I'll show you. Okay, that's the ship. So that's how we get down there. That's 2 weeks on an icebreaker,
Wow.
Which is horrible. I thought an icebreaker was the same as a normal ship, and it was only later on I found out that they don't have stabilizers, because they're actually designed to rock around, and that's how they break the ice. So it's horrible. So 2 weeks on the ship, and then we end up landing. That's the station. That's the station in summer. Not very attractive. So this is my team, and the number one rule I had for my team was respect trumps harmony. And the reason we did that was even our get to know you barbecue, I recognised how different we were. So we had a 24-year-old death metal music fan living with a 63-year-old grandfather. We had married, single, gay, straight, had a couple of parents, had a student, had different religions, had different cultures. Our biggest diversity of all, we had an electrical engineer from Germany living with a plumber from Mudgee. And I recognised right from the get-go, right from our get to know you barbecue, because I didn't recruit them, I just got given this team. And I thought, wow, how are we going to live together for 24 hours a day through months of darkness and, get along? And so the rule was respect trumps harmony, because I thought it's not practical to think that we'd all love each other. And we didn't. Yeah. We didn't even like each other, half of them. And I thought, so I'll take that off the table and say, we don't have to love each other. We don't have to even like each other the whole time, but we will always treat each other with respect. And I've done a bit of research on it since I got back around how important that notion is of respect over harmony. And there's a couple of things that make it important, particularly in the situation we're in now with COVID-19. It's because when people are under enough pressure and under stress, they need to be able to speak up. We need to deal with stuff. And that was my goal with the team. Like, let's raise the issue. Let's talk about it. Let's sort it and move on, because we've got more important things to do. And when teams focus on harmony and trying to keep the peace, a few things happen. Firstly, any bullying or harassment still goes on. It just goes underground. People won't raise it as an issue because they don't want to rock the boat. The other issue is you won't ever have innovation. People can't innovate because they don't want to rock the boat. So they're the people who sit in meetings and sort of go, yeah, and then walk out and go, that's not going to work. And they just want to keep the peace. And the third one is physical and mental health, that when people focus on harmony, on just let's keep the peace, that's when people get hurt. Or equally mental health. Like if the culture is, it's all great here and we're all fantastic, like a big family, no one's going to put their hand up and go, actually, I'm not fantastic right now, I'm struggling a bit today. And so for my team, that mantra of respect trumps harmony was the real difference, the key difference in how I could navigate this team through such a difficult situation when we were such different people. Like we had nothing in common except that we lived in Antarctica. But that putting respect up front was number one, absolutely.
So you met them obviously before you got down there, and were able to do some work with them and see those differences, and then you layered this respect trumps harmony into the conversation, which I think is brilliant. It also then allows people to surface an issue and have a conversation around something, as opposed to what you talked about, that sort of undermining sort of agreement that can happen behind the scenes. And I often like it to a sporting team. A sporting team, if I see you could do something better on a sporting team, I've got enough respect for you to tell you around that. As opposed to, quite often in business, we tell everyone else except the person that it can impact. So this is an incredibly simple but important lesson to be able to put this into the conversation and get this into the speak. Did you have to remind people very often of this? Or was it a speak, or did you say it once and they got it?
Every day. I probably 2 or 3 times a day. Because it's so important. And so when things did go pear-shaped, for example, we had a plane crash in summer, and I had to manage a search and rescue following this plane crash. My team were brilliant in a crisis. They were fantastic in a crisis. And it was never because we loved each other. It was never because we all got along and we're all happy. It was because we had this bedrock of respect. And so anytime someone would say to me, things would come up, someone would say, oh, they don't understand how this person has given up everything to work in Antarctica for a year, and yet they haven't even left the station. Like, they're obviously there for the money. They have no interest in photographing Antarctica. And some of the others would say, but you know, that's not right. And I said, well, no, respect trumps harmony. You don't have to agree with that. You don't have to think it's right. You just have to respect that they have the right to do that. And so respect just came into everything, which meant we have lots of conversations about difficult things. And if we didn't agree, that was okay, because we just respected that person had a different opinion. And I think sporting teams are a great analogy. And I think if you surveyed enough sporting teams, you'd find that in quite a few successful teams, there is conflict. You know, there is constructive conflict, and they don't necessarily see eye to eye on everything, and some of them will have nothing in common. But when it comes to it, when push comes to shove and they need to deliver, they have that ability to go, well, I respect your contribution and I respect your right to be here. Don't have to love you, but I respect you. So yeah, it was everything.
So Rach, what I'm loving about this is, look, a lot of the clients who are tuned into this would have a set of values sitting on the wall somewhere, like, you know, here are our corporate values, or the values we've created and what we live by. But what you've done is you brought that into a language pattern, and, you know, every day, 2 or 3 times a day, in saying that, gets it into the conversation. So, hey, we may not be harmonious, but we're going to respect each other with this, and reinforcing that. So, you know, everyone tuning in, it would be interesting to see how often are you not just demonstrating the values, but utilizing your values in the conversation to surface particular issues and challenges, which is great.
Oh, and it's so true. I'll show you the next one. I work with a lot of teams who do that, who have their values and they're on the wall. And one of the most common values is integrity, and it's a good value. You know, it's a great value. But I'll say to them, well, what does it look like? What's the behavior? How do you know you're treating each other with integrity? That behavior is a lot harder to define. The values are easy, but it's the behavior that supports that value. And so for us, integrity was one of our values. And we had a rule here called no triangles. And no triangles simply means I don't speak to you about Michael, or you don't speak to me about Rachael. If I have something to say to someone, I go direct to the person. I don't take it to a third party, because, you know, we all know how it feels if you've upset someone at work you don't even know, and you find out from a third party, and it's horrible. It's out of context. It's horrible. So just that simple rule of no triangles was so important for us, because it meant it built the respect again. And so I remember the first day it happened. One of the guys came up to me and said, Alan did such and such to me. And I said, do you want me to talk to him? Is that why you're telling me you want me to speak to him? And he said, no, I'm just letting you know. And I said, well, you know, you're dobbing. And I said, and then I said out loud, I said, but if you don't talk to him and I don't talk to him, nothing can change. Nothing will change. And you and I will have this conversation next week. And then in my head, I've gone, oh man, you know, we're here for 52 weeks. I'm going to have this conversation, you know, another 51 times. And that's just one of them. You know, there's 17 other people. And so I said, look, let's not do this triangle thing. Hey, let's have no triangles. Let's go direct to the person. I mean, if you can't sort it out, by all means, come back to me. That's my job. But initially, out of respect, the first port of call needs to be that person. They're owed that respect. And it's really interesting. I've just researched this. I've gone back to 200 teams who've implemented no triangles over the past 15 years. And of those 200 teams, 100% of the 200 teams said it improved morale and improved collaboration. And the other thing that blew me away was 89% of them said it freed up time and energy. So, and in, I think, a third of cases, up to an hour a day. So imagine an extra hour a day, even an extra 20 minutes a day, where you're not having to listen to that whingy conversation, which just exhausts you. And I think particularly for leaders, we know we've got good people that we need to go and see. Like, I knew in Antarctica, I had some good people I needed to go and tell them, you know, you're doing great, thank you. But I didn't have the energy. I was so darn tired from these conversations that I didn't have the energy to go and see those people. So as soon as I implemented no triangles, it freed up all this time and energy that I could go and see my good people. And I think if you do nothing else, when we come back out of COVID-19 and you can reset, you know, your compass a bit with your team, no triangles, it's such a simple tool, and it builds respect, and it just frees up so much time and energy. And it's the one thing I wish I'd done 20 years ago, 30 years ago in my career, because it freed up my time. And it's just a, you know, it improves morale, it improves mental health. The research was showing that in terms of mental health and morale, people feel confident coming to work knowing that the other people at work aren't talking about them behind their back. And that certainly was the case with my team. You know, as I'm really upfront about, we didn't all love each other, but we knew someone was not complaining about you behind your back. If you'd done something to upset someone or hurt their feelings, you would hear it from that person. You wouldn't hear it from a third party. And it's just such a simple thing, but gee, it certainly changed my life, changed our team.
Yeah, so there's a bit of self-esteem in there to be able to say, hey, I'm going to share how I'm feeling, or share what's occurring with that. Any tips around how to implement that within our clients' businesses? So, you know, conceptually, it's pretty easy to get. Like, yeah, of course, if I've got an issue with Rachael, let me go and talk with Rachael. Let me not have 7 different conversations with other people to somehow, I don't know, build my case, or some weird kind of thing that quite often happens in business. But is there some tips as to how to implement that?
Yeah, there's a couple of tips. The most important thing, if it's your team, the most important thing is you need to get I got the hands in the air. I actually got my team together and I said, who wants to commit to this no triangles? Put your hand up. Everyone's hand went up. That made them accountable. So whenever they came running to me, I could say, hang on, I saw you put your hand up and commit to no triangles. So why are you talking to me about it? Why aren't you talking to him about it? So the first thing is to get that accountability from your people. If you're talking about your clients or your customers, it's about being really explicit to them that if you've got any questions, concerns, complaints, ideas, feedback, I want to hear it. Pick up the phone and give me a call, because I really want to hear it. I can help you. It doesn't help anyone if you complain to a third party. I'm here to help you. And so just having that communication and picking up the phone. The other really important thing, and probably the barrier when in our research, the barrier to no triangles, the one thing that might stop it is people having the confidence and the skill to have that conversation. So it took me 2 months to embed no triangles in our culture in Antarctica, because I had to coach the guys on how to have the conversation. If I'd just said, right, no triangles, then it could have gone real pear-shaped. And so I had to coach them on how to have the conversation. And one little tip that we used down there was to take out the absolute words. So words like everyone, no one, always, never. Because if I say to you, oh, Michael, I need to talk to you because you're always late for work, you can turn around and say, well, yesterday I was 30 minutes early. And then the whole argument just gets emotional.
The fight kind of thing going. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. Where if I use facts, if I say, look, we had a chat last week about it and you said you could be here at 8:30 every morning, but this morning you rocked up at 8:45. That's a fact. That's what you can't argue with, facts and data. So and it's same as if you say, everyone thinks it's a bad idea, you can find one example of one person who doesn't. So it's not everyone, it's not never, it's not always. My team wouldn't come to me and say, oh, everyone thinks this, because I'd challenge it and say, really? Everyone? And they'd say, well, not this one and not this one. Okay, it's not everyone, it's you. So just taking out those emotional words, and it's natural, you get emotional. Everyone does. If someone is accusing you, which is how it feels, if someone says you always do something or you never do something, you get your back up. So using the facts and the data and saying, you know, that report was due at 3 o'clock, you delivered it at 3:30. We talked about this a week ago. You said there's no barrier to you getting the report in on time. Just use facts and data. And that's the 2 key things for me to implement the no triangles. Yeah.
And the other thing that was in there, Rachel, without maybe even you knowing it, is it was all towards an overall business outcome. It was all towards an outcome. Hey, this is getting in the way of us achieving this. Let's have a conversation around it. So one is no triangles, and then secondly, getting rid of the absolutes and directing it towards, here's what we're actually out to achieve. Hey, this could be an issue getting in the way of this. So what I love about that is it wasn't playing the personal attack game. It was facts and data, and here's where we're heading. Let's get clear on it, which is great.
Yeah. You just reminded me. I'll see if I've got the this next one. Some of the crew who've seen me present will know all about this one, the Bacon Wars, and this is exactly what you're talking about. I didn't even know it was going on. Right, I was just there one day, and one of was the plumber, I think, came up to me and said, "Oh, we need to have a meeting to decide how to cook the bacon on Monday morning when the chef has the morning off. And I'm like, what? And he said, the diesel's like it soft, and no, the plumbers like it soft, and the diesel mechanics like it crispy. And we want to have a meeting so you can decide how it should be cooked. And I'm like, nah. Yeah. Can you imagine stopping a $30 million project to go, yeah, we're having a meeting about bacon? When I got to the bottom of it, I did the root cause analysis, the 5 whys. Why? I got to the bottom of it. Turns out the relationship had broken down over another issue. And they thought the other team was deliberately cooking the bacon the opposite way to irritate them. And I thought, wow, this has actually got nothing to do with bacon. It's about respect. They're feeling disrespected. And I started to identify all these little things that happen in workplaces and teams that drive people nuts. And that's why it's because they're a symptom of a deeper issue, and the deeper issue is the lack of respect. So it's things like, the classic one in Australia is actually dirty coffee mugs. People leaving, dirty or leaving food in the fridge in the staff tea room. So dirty coffee mugs, people who've got pool cars. I know in real estate, a lot of you share vehicles and you'll take the car out for a inspection or to meet a client. It's people who take that car out and bring it back without petrol in it. And so the next person jumps in the car and there's no petrol in it. And I had that one with one of my teams. And I said, oh, come on, if you're going to take the car out, can you just fill it up with petrol, before you bring it back? It was only when I stopped talking about petrol and started talking about respect that the behavior changed, because when you bring that car back with no petrol, what that implies is my time's more important than your time. Same with the coffee mugs, my time's more important than your time. So I'm going to leave my stuff lying around and you can pick up after me. And it blew me away that I finally realized why these things bug me. And they bug me so much. I'm like, now I know, because it's a symptom of a deeper issue. And I've worked with so many teams where meetings start late. So a 10 o'clock meeting starts at 10:15 or 10:20. And I'll say, why aren't we starting on time? And they say, oh, well, we're just waiting for Rachael. And I'm like, and that's sort of like this culture of, oh, well, and I'm like, no, that's so disrespectful. If other people can arrive on time to the meeting, then so can you. And it's just, it's a real sign of disrespect. And I think, given, again, going back to the situation we're in now, as we all go back out into coming back to workplaces where we can, these little things are going to drive us nuts again, because we've been in isolation for so long, and we're going to be back into the speed and the craziness of life. And so these little things will pop up again. And so if you're wondering why people are getting so heat up about this, it's because it's a symptom of a deeper issue, and that deeper issue is the lack of respect. So yeah, there's dozens of them. I hear every day nearly I hear of a new one. They're everywhere.
And Rachael, for me, this is a little bit like, that pebble that sits in the shoe, and most of the time it's okay. And then the shoe and the pebble move just a little bit, and suddenly it's like you get this little jab, I should say nice, you get this jab that has that negative kind of connotation to it. One of the things that I think, if we look at this as a simple concept, and we're sort of like talking about coming back into the workplace now, a lot of people are either back or they're, half the team's back and some of the team is back. How would you deal with these things? Because it's sort of, there's a real opportunity as a line in the sand to say, hey, this is pre-COVID-19 how we did things. Let's say someone has habitually, and maybe the leader who's tuning here has actually said, well, that's okay for this behavior to happen, but it's actually not okay. If you look at the most of our clients, they're wanting sort of a high performance kind of a business and be known for that. These things eat away at that, don't they?
Oh, and I think you are absolutely spot on. I think for all of the angst and the trouble and the pain we've been through the last few months, the opportunity is to reset, is to navigate towards a new direction. And I think particularly Bacon Wars, it's a gentle language. So rather than coming back to the office and saying, what are the dysfunctional behaviours that we need to eliminate, or what are the things that have driven us crazy for all this time that we need to stop, it's a gentle language to say, look, while I was in lockdown, I watched this webinar with Michael on real estate results and heard about this concept of Bacon Wars and how little things drive people crazy. And it's a gentle language. So people will laugh. They'll go, oh, really? Bacon War. So it's gentle, but it's a circuit breaker. It's a way of saying, okay, so what are our Bacon Wars? What are the little things that have driven us crazy, or, might be a symptom of disrespect? That this is our opportunity now. This is our new normal, and we can set the rules from this day on, draw a line in the sand and go from this day forward, this will be the new normal. And I think you're absolutely spot on. And it could be anything from splitting commissions to referrals, everything. There's a whole heap of stuff that goes on under the surface, and we know it happens. And it's sort of, we turn a blind eye to it. But this is a really good opportunity to go, okay, so in the past, this has bothered me a bit. Now, given we've got all this other stuff we need to worry about now with COVID-19, this is a real opportunity to draw that line in the sand and go from this day on, how is this business going to look? What are our, going back to the values conversation, what are the values? What's the behaviour that will underpin the values? And more importantly, how do we have this culture around respect where we might disagree with each other, and that's okay. You know, that constructive conflict is okay.
Yeah, fantastic. The other thing that I love about that, and you said this earlier, is do we all agree on this? Let's get a show of hands. Everyone agree on it? So you've got this physical sort of public kind of view to say, yes, everyone has actually agreed to this, because that gives you as the leader the ability to say, hey, I'm a little bit confused here. We actually agreed on this and it hasn't happened. And I think one of the things that I've seen is sometimes a leader puts that in place. Here's the new thing. It doesn't go well the first week or the second week, and we let it go, as opposed to, and I'd love to get your view on this as to, 9 months in isolation. How do you make sure you lock and load these things? And that's a reinforcement strategy, I'm sure.
It's absolutely reinforced. It's reinforcement and consistency. So it was, even though there were people on my team who I had a natural affinity with, who in the real world, I'd be friends with them, down in that setting, in that environment, such, intense lockdown and isolation, I couldn't have favorites. I couldn't be friends with this person and not friends with this person. So I had to have an arm's length sort of relationship with all of them. But being consistent, every time someone tried to engage me in, oh, he said this to me, or did you hear what she said? I could say, hang on, no triangles. So I had to be really consistent. And I think the challenge with leaders, and I've worked with a few teams, including Bank of Melbourne, have no triangles on the number one of their code of conduct. It starts with the exec team. So if the senior leadership and the executive are saying, oh, we'll have no triangles, but then they're having a snipe at one of the other members of the exec team or one of the other parts of the business, then of course it's going to fall over, because people will see that behaviour and interpret that as that's acceptable. So it has to start with the senior leaders, and if they've got an issue, behind closed doors, they need to go and speak to the other executive or the other senior manager, not talk to their staff about it. And how I got around that one, because it's different, and it's a really important point. It's really about that whinging behaviour. It's really about that just niggling, complaining, whinging. It's very different to having a peer that you use for peer support. And so I had a peer, I was at Davis Station. I was really great friends with a guy called Graham Cook, who was at Mawson. And I couldn't see Graham. He's 1,500 kilometres away. I couldn't see him, but I could pick up the phone and talk to him. And I'd say, oh, mate, they're fighting about who put the milk jug back into the fridge without milk in it. And he'd say, oh, mate, we had that fight last week. This week they're fighting about who made up the orange juice concentrate incorrectly. That peer support is what kept me sane, because I couldn't talk to my staff about the other expeditioners. I certainly didn't want to elevate everything to head office. I didn't want to keep picking up the phone, talking to head office all the time, saying, oh, guess what this one did. But having a peer, and I didn't need to name names, I could just say to him, oh, I'm dealing with this issue at the moment. Have you ever come across something like that? And a third party sometimes has clarity that you might not, because you're in the situation. So having that peer support, it was the only thing I had to keep me sane. And I know that's one of the strengths of RER. It's that peer support, someone who knows what you're going through. They get it. They know what you're going through. And that's just a much better option than complaining to your staff about one of your colleagues, or equally, complaining to one of your colleagues. Just having a peer that you can go and have a beer with, or pick up the phone and talk to, and they just get it. That's how I got around it. That's how I kept myself sane and mentally strong.
Yeah, I think this is so important. So there's two parts to that. One is sometimes that problem shared is a problem halved. And if you might have someone say, hey, this too will pass, and like, oh, okay, good. This is not the rest of my life. And I think this is, back to COVID-19, this too will pass. So it's a moment in time as opposed to the rest of our entire existence. One of the things that's interesting, Rachel, I'd like to get your view on this, and Jackie's just reminded me, there's this concept of confirmation bias. So we're looking for the answers that we already know. So will you back up my view? Will you back up my view? Did you have much answer shopping going on?
Answer shopping was, and that was the other thing that No Triangles put a dampener on. So I'm glad Jackie reminded me of that. The answer shopping was huge, and I had never had a name for it before. I'd never had it. I couldn't identify the behaviour. I knew it irritated me. I knew when I'd said no to one of my team and they went over my head and asked my boss and got what they wanted. Usually it was around things like resourcing. So they might want an Apple Mac computer, and we were a Microsoft outfit. And so I'd say, no, we can't service Apples. We don't have anyone on the IT team who can provide customer support for Apple Mac. But then they'd go and ask someone else, and that person would say yes. So my boss, the general manager, would say yes, not understanding the impact. I was working with a franchise team last week, and so they were in fast moving consumer goods. So January is historically their busy time because that's when it is generally in retail. And so that there was a rule around we don't take annual leave in January. No one does, because it's our busiest month of the year. And so one of the staff asked the store manager, can I have holidays in January? It was told no, the policy is no. That person then went to the franchise owner and said, can I have holidays in January? I've already planned this, blah, blah. And the owner of the business said, yeah, sure. And when I heard the story, I'm like, you can imagine how that manager felt being disempowered like that. And so No Triangles also stops the answer shopping and pushes back the accountability. So if someone tries it on you, if someone tries to rope you into that, you can actually say, I'm not the accountable person for that decision. You need to go and speak to that person. And it's a really important point when there's owners in a business, because often the business will grow and the right thing to do is put in a management layer. It's the right thing to do. But then you've got to be careful that the staff underneath that management layer aren't cutting out the manager and going up to the owner of the business. Because if they do it once and get what they wanted, they'll keep doing it. And so, and we know why they do it. That's why they do it, because they got what they wanted. And, children do it. They'll ask one parent and they say no. And so they're going to ask another parent, they all do it. But unfortunately, those children grow up into adults and try it in the workplace. So having the No Triangle stops the answer shopping as well, because it holds the accountability. It says, no, I'm not the accountable person. You need to go and speak to that person. So it really is a simple tool, but it changes a culture really well.
Yeah, fantastic. So one of the things that's interesting is just reminding me that's exactly what kids do. So if we're not careful, we can just bring that into the workplace and become part of the normal way of doing things that'll have a massive detrimental impact on performance, direction, where we're heading. Now, talking about that, where we're heading, you had 9 months in isolation. We're talking about we've had a month, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks in some form of isolation, and not real isolation where, the options of you getting out of Antarctica was, no, the ship's coming in this time frame, you're locked and loaded. But surely, coming out of that, there must have been some amazing lessons that, coming back into society, back into the Melbourne and so on, and going like, okay, I'm here. How was that for you?
And I've just brought up a slide on that. It was horrific. It was really tough. And I've just started reflecting on that. So you have to excuse me a bit because I'm just sort of still collecting my thoughts on this one. I've gone back to my journals and thought about what impacted me the most so that I could help, maybe share it and help someone. Because what really affected me the most was I was totally unprepared for things. And we were so excited to get back, and the psychologist had said, you'll be excited to get back, like we'll all be excited to come out of lockdown. But I think the most important thing for leaders in particular is to know, again, respect trumps harmony, and that how I react will be different to how someone else reacts. And things like noise and smell, so sensory overload. So if we've been in lockdown for 2 months and you haven't left the house except to go shopping or exercise, then coming back to a capital city where there's sirens and there's horns and there's traffic and the pedestrian crossing beeping like that's overwhelming, and the smell is overwhelming. The other thing is choice. So for 2 months, we've had very little choice about what we're going to do on a weekend or where we're going to go. And then suddenly you've got options and choice, and these doors of choice are opened, and it's huge. I remember being in the breakfast cereal aisle at a supermarket, just being overwhelmed at the choice of breakfast cereal because I had no choice around that for a year. What else? Physical contact. And I think this is really important for people who live alone. They might not have had a hug or a handshake for 2 months. And then there'll be the other people coming out who are desperate, craving that human interaction. So neither is right or wrong. It's just that respecting the difference, that just because you feel you need to hug people because you're like back in the real world, there'll be some people who've been on their own who might be a bit sort of, I need to adjust. And I think that the words adjustment and transition are what I keep thinking about the last couple of days, that we will react differently. And some people, it will be overwhelming. For some people, it'll be the best thing that's happened this year, and they'll be so excited to get back out there. But I think as leaders, it's just knowing that even though I might not feel much about the noise or the smells, someone else might be quite overwhelmed. The other thing is that managing that expectation. And so maybe coming back to work in the office one day a week, or just for the mornings or just for the afternoons, and actually transitioning back into the workplace, not sort of flicking the switch and going, okay, we're all back in on Monday. As of Monday, we're all in. And just managing expectations around how we will react. And for me, it was overwhelming, and I didn't expect it. I honestly didn't. I thought I'll be so stoked to be back in my hometown with my family and my friends, and go out with my girlfriends and have a drink. And I thought everything would be overwhelmingly positive. And so I was quite reeling, like the first 3 or 4 months. It was just overwhelmed. There's so much overwhelming things happening with noise and sound and choice and speed. Having to rush off to one meeting to the next, and then having to race off to sport, and then having to race off somewhere else, which we haven't done for 2 months, besides racing from one Zoom meeting to the next. We haven't physically had to move and drive and go places, and just all of that overwhelmed me. So I think there'll be some people who will struggle, and there'll be others who'll shine. I think it's a spectrum. I think hopefully most of us are in the middle, but just having that on our radar, that, people will react differently, I think is going to be really important.
So there's a couple of really cool points coming out of this. And in my mind, Rachael, I'm a 1 to 10 kind of a guy. Yeah. So it would be neat for those who are tuned in to think about it. So there's a continuum of excitement, for example. Some will be an excitement level 10. Some will be an excitement level 1. They say, can we have a bit more of this hermit lifestyle? They're not looking forward to coming back. In fact, one of the things to look at is, well, what are some rituals that support the different kind of ways that the team are operating? And what are some new rituals that I think we may have learnt in this time frame? We've got a lot of real estate people tuned in today, and people are recognizing vendors, owners absolutely love Zoom meetings as opposed to physical meetings of coming to the office and so on. Now, it might mean that out of a campaign, you can take the new normal that you've got up on the slide there is you might be able to bring 2 or 3 of those meetings face to face, and now on Zoom, and there's one sit down in the office. So things like this, I think, are really important. So what's your excitement level? What do you think we can bring forward into it? And what are some either new rituals or some rituals to reset as we head back into the work mode? But I love the fact that Rachael, you've talked about how people handle it differently, and being okay with those differences, as opposed to everyone should be like me, or everyone should be this way. Why aren't you super excited about this? Because I might have actually liked some of those things, or I might have a 1 to 10 on intimacy. I'm looking for a hug. I'm actually looking for me having some private quiet time because I actually love the shutdown. It's interesting.
Yeah, and if you've been homeschooling, like I have, you'll be like, out of here. Yeah, go. And you're right, you're spot on. And I think it's just asking the question. It's that whole respect trumps harmony. Ask the question, of your vendors, what suits you? Are you happy to do Zoom meetings? Or the real extroverted people might love the physical face-to-face meetings. There's others that quite like the online presence. And that's one of the things that's come out of this whole experience is people have reacted differently and to different things. So what freaks out one person, someone else will love. And as you said, it's a spectrum. There'll be hopefully most people in the middle, but it's just having that tuning on that radar, tuning yourself into it, knowing that just because I'm feeling this way, someone else might not be, or equally someone else might be. So if you're feeling a bit churned, and one of the really important things we did down south was we had a language around that mental health and that feeling a bit funny, and we called it NQR. So NQR is just not quite right. That's what it stands for, not quite right. So we could ask each other, oh, Michael, how you doing today? And if you said, oh, yeah, I'm a bit NQR today, that was shorthand. So rather than you saying, I'm loving the expedition, I just miss my family, I wish I could go back back to Australia or New Zealand and see my family, give them a hug and then come home. I come back to Antarctica. Instead of saying all of that, you could just say, yeah, I'm a bit NQR today. And people could nod and go, yeah, I totally get that. And I think just simple language like that, when we go back saying, if you're feeling something kind of like a code, a secret code, if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed or you're feeling a bit anxious and you're not sure why, it's okay to say, I'm NQR, I'm not quite right today, because none of us have been through this before. So none of us know exactly how we'll react when we do come back to the new normal. So just having the language around saying, yeah, I'm a bit NQR, and then you can talk about that, because it's all about that scale and spectrum that will transition and adapt at different rates. Some of us will put it behind us in 4 or 5 weeks. There'll be others possibly 6 months down the track who are still somewhat traumatized. So just understanding, everyone will be different. I think even that puts us ahead of the game, I reckon.
Yeah, Rachael, just absolutely awesome strategies. And I love that NQR and putting it into a code, where quite often, we're in these positive environments, no one wants to have that negative conversation. But the problem is, if you don't, you're shutting things down as opposed to allowing it to be open, honest, and hey, this is how I'm really feeling. And to bring it into a code is a really cool way of doing it, because one, it creates that respect. I understand where you're going from or coming from, and let me actually help you navigate to a different way and a new way of doing things. Hey, look, it's been awesome you sharing these particular insights and strategies. If the guys want to connect with you or follow you, what's the best way of doing that?
Yeah, it's been fantastic. So jump on my website, which is just rachaelrobertson.com. As of this afternoon, I'm hoping to finally write an article on those seven tips for leading your team out of isolation or transitioning out of isolation. So either jump on my website, I'm on LinkedIn as well, but I'm hoping to get something up this afternoon to try and help the leaders get ahead. And so just start preparing for when we do start coming back to the new normal in the next week or two. So that'd be awesome. I'd love to hear from anyone.
Yeah, Rachael, been an absolute pleasure having you on here today. Thank you so much for your time, your energy, and your commitment, and sharing this message. I think, now more than ever before, this is such an important message to bring these practical, incredibly doable, and culture shifting strategies in place that'll make a big difference. So guys, can we give Rachael a virtual round of applause from that point of view? Just been absolutely brilliant.